come from the left. And so, in order to restore the open marketplace of ideas, the healthy exchange of ideas, essential to our self-government, we must regulate where the problem is. And today, the problem lies on the left.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, I want to ask you, and thank you for your service. A common refrain is that Antifa is an ideology.
Wow. Okay, that clip right there, that's exactly why people are waking up to the truth about how one side controls the narrative. Welcome back to Hot News Today, where we cut through the noise and talk about what's really going on in politics. Now, I just finished watching this hearing, and Michael Knowles absolutely nailed it. While everyone else was busy pretending to be balanced, he came in with facts, logic, and moral clarity, the kind of backbone we wish more people in Washington had. This isn't about left versus right anymore. It's about honesty versus hypocrisy. And you're going to see exactly why as we dive into this one. So before we roll the full clip, hit that like button if you're tired of double standard in the media, subscribe if you believe free speech still matters, and drop a comment below. Do you think Antifa is just an idea or a real organized threat? All right, let's get into it. Here's the full video, and then I'll tell you exactly why Michael Knowles was 100% right.
Thank you, Senator. I want to point out that the CSIS study that's been mentioned here and repeated ad nauseum excluded violence at protests from their study, allowing them to systematically ignore Antifa and Black Lives Matter riots. But they did make an exception for Charlottesville, interestingly. Even using their flawed methodology, CSIS recently reported that left-wing violence in 2025 outpaces right-wing violence. Imagine how much bigger that disparity would be if they actually weren't cooking the books. So without objection, I move to enter into the record an article by Tim Carney explaining CIS's biased methodology. Without objection, will be entered into the record. We'll start with questionings. Mr. Knowles, I want to start with you. You're not going to have any bigger proponent of free speech than me, given especially what I did in my last job and this one. I believe in it wholeheartedly. I think it's the First Amendment is the beating heart of our Constitution. But what we're really talking about here is conduct, of course, violent conduct. And you've talked about you can't really have this competition in the marketplace if the marketplace is being destroyed and shot up in many instances. How do we get at this problem? What's the road forward in your view?
We might be able to find a little bipartisan agreement if we acknowledge something that both parties at different times have acknowledged, which is that marketplaces of ideas or any other kind of marketplace only function when there are rules and when we abide by those rules. You can't have a marketplace if bandits keep shooting up the marketplace. And this is why it's so important to identify where the threats to the marketplace have really been coming from. Have we seen left-wing speakers shouted down on campuses? Have we seen left-wing events interrupted by terrorists? Rarely so, if ever. I can't think of an occasion. I am amused that Senator Durbin began by warning against pointing to one side or the other, making this a partisan issue, before beginning one of the most partisan invectives that I have ever heard. But I'm not even opposed to a partisan invective here, because I think it is very important that we identify where the threats are. I think any honest Democrat even would have to acknowledge, as the Atlantic magazine did, as even CSIS has acknowledged.
See what I mean? Michael Knowles didn't come there to play games. He came armed with truth. And the part that hit me the hardest was when he said you can't have a marketplace of ideas if bandits keep shooting up the marketplace. That's powerful, and he's absolutely right. For years, we've been told that threats to free speech come from the right, but look around. Who's shutting down speakers on college campuses? Who's turning protests into riots? Who's making people afraid to voice an opinion that doesn't fit the approved narrative? It's not conservatives. Knowles was spot on.
That the threats today to the free marketplace of ideas come from the left. And so, in order to restore the open marketplace of ideas, the healthy exchange of ideas, essential to our self-government, we must regulate where the problem is. And today, the problem lies on the left.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf, I want to ask you, and thank you for your service. A common refrain is that Antifa is an ideology, not an organization. Could you talk about, in your experience, how that is complete and utter nonsense, that this is actually a pretty well-coordinated organization with safe houses and money that's laundered internationally, quite frankly, not just domestically.
Yeah, well, I think we've seen that across the country. I think the indictment by the Department of Justice in Texas talks about the Antifa cell there in North Texas, about how they do coordinate, how they do pool their resources. I saw it firsthand in Portland, although it was very difficult to prove at the time. Those types of anarchists and others there being well organized, being well funded, being resupplied daily, not that they were doing that themselves, but that they had help. And so as you look across the spectrum here, is Antifa like other organizations? Does it have a hierarchy and an org chart and everything else? No, it's very different. But that doesn't make it any less dangerous. That doesn't say, and that shouldn't mean from a law enforcement perspective, well, let's not actually investigate. Let's not actually start to look at who these individuals are, how they're organized, how they're funded, how they're financed. Just because they're decentralized doesn't make them any less threat.
Free speech only works when everyone plays by the same rules, when debate replaces destruction. And when he pointed out that even left-leaning outlets like The Atlantic and Size admit left-wing violence has surpassed right-wing violence, that's not just rhetoric. That's reality backed by data, even if they tried to cook the books. Then you heard Mr. Wolf and Mr. Schneiderler confirm what many of us already suspected. Antifa isn't some harmless, spontaneous movement. It's coordinated, funded, connected. They have safe houses, international money flow, encrypted channels. This isn't an idea, it's an operation. And the fact that some people in government still try to downplay that is insane. If this were happening on the right, it would be called terrorism in a heartbeat. But when it's on the left, suddenly it's just activism? Come on.
Thank you. Mr. Scheidler, I'm going to go to you and pick up on that point because you alluded to it in your testimony. Understanding what Antifa is and its connections and organization, what are some suggestions you might have of how we could get at this problem of this radical organization hell-bent on destroying America? I mean, this is their stated mission. How do we get about that?
Well, I'm a firm supporter of the president's recommendation to target Antifa as a foreign terrorist organization. There are a number of Antifa organizations that operate across Western Europe and Latin America, which would be justified. We would be justified in designating as a foreign terrorist organization. There are also a number of networks which provide material support, including the one that I mentioned in my testimony, and that is a very common method in which Antifa receives support. Much like, for example, Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, where they host media outlets like Dabiq and Inspire, which will give you both ideological instructions as to how to become Antifa, what you need to believe and how you need to believe it. They also provide instructions on what you should do if you wish to be Antifa, including how you should organize, how you can avoid arrest, what encrypted apps to use, what websites to use. They'll also provide instructions on how to destroy critical infrastructure, including 5G wireless communications, and how to derail trains. As, for example, the website It's Going Down did in a case that was related to two anarchists in the Pacific Northwest that derailed a number of trains in which the federal government was able to achieve a conviction. So these networks can be targeted for engaging in material support for terrorism. We are not talking about speech. We are talking about manifestos describing how to overthrow the government and how to do that with violence.
Thank you. And the President Trump has designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, and I've written to Secretary Rubio for the foreign terrorist organization, and we'll see what happens with that. Ranking Member Welch.
Knowles is doing what so few public figures dare to do, calling out the double standard, naming the threat, and demanding accountability. That's not hate speech. That's leadership. Here's the thing. If we don't protect the true marketplace of ideas, we lose democracy itself. Because once one side can riot, censor, and silence with no consequence, freedom dies quietly, not from censorship laws, but from fear. And that's why Knowles' voice matters. That's why hearings like this matter. So, hats off to Michael Knowles for saying what so many are too scared to admit out loud. If you agree with him, if you believe free speech needs defending, make sure to like this video, subscribe to Hot News Today, and share it with someone who still thinks Antifa is just an idea. Because as we just saw, ideas don't throw bricks, set fires, and derail trains.